You'll turn with me to 1 Chronicles chapter 11. 1 Chronicles chapter 11. We're going to work through a rather lengthy section. Section commonly known as David's Mighty Men. Commonly what it's known as. It's amazing how heroes have kind of made a comeback. I grew up and I had a good friend of mine, and he collected comic books, and we would go down to the store, different stores, and we'd always get comics books. There'd be Spider-Man, Batman, Superman, Wolverine, Hulk, all these different guys, all these heroes, and we'd read about their deeds, and we thought it was fantastic. And these guys have all made a comeback. Okay, in May, Avengers: Age of Ultron comes out, and I heard that some cinemas throughout the country are going to be playing all of the Marvel movies back to back prior to Avengers: Age of Ultron. I think that's 49 total hours or something like that, okay? 49 total hours, all right? So there's a hunger and a thirst in our culture for heroes. We want people we can look up to, people who are mighty indeed, okay? We're tired of wimps. We're tired of pansies, but we don't really know where to look. We don't know really where to turn, and there's a lot of reasons for that. Part of it is our culture has been gutted of masculinity and true masculinity, what that means. But as we come to 1 Chronicles 11, starting verse 10, we find heroes. We find men who did great deeds. I like the translation of Benaniah, the son of Jehoiada, the son of a valiant man who had done many great deeds, verse 22. These are great men. There's a long list here, by the way, a very long list. And more than likely, this is a accumulation of all these mighty men that were David. Some had died, some would have died, and they'd added more in to the list. This list is included, although not the whole thing, in 2 Samuel chapter 23, at the end of David's life, with David's mighty men. Okay? And so what we have here is a story about these great men. And the question is the same question we asked last week. Why is it here? Why did the chronicler feel free to want to put it here? Why are David's mighty men in two places in the Bible? Why did they show up twice? Do we need to know about Jehoiada or Benaniah going down on a pit in a snowy day and killing a lion? Do we really need to know that? Why is it here? Okay. So we'll walk through the text, and then we'll look at what the purpose of the text is and why it exists. Okay. Verse 10 is actually really an important verse, and we're going to come back to it later. It kind of sums up a bunch of the themes of Chronicles, especially verses 11 and 12. Chapters 11 and 12 are talking about the consolidation of David's kingdom. And they're showing us how David became powerful and what he did. Last week we saw about how he took Jerusalem and captured that city and made that city his capital, and all Israel went up to him. Well, today we see he has his city, he has his coronation, but like any good king, he's got to have his men, okay? And that's what this is verses 10 through 47 are about. Okay? So verse 10, now these are the heads of the mighty men whom David had, who strengthened themselves with him in his kingdom, with all Israel, there's a little phrase again, all Israel, to make him king according to the word of the Lord concerning Israel. Okay? So that kind of sums it all up. Kingdom, David is king, everybody uniting around David according to the word of the Lord. Okay? The chronicler is emphasizing the unity that came under David. The unity that came underneath King David. Okay. It starts out with Jehoshabeam, the son of a Hakmonite. There's all sorts of crazy words in here. You try to read this sometime. I was tempted to make the Old Testament reader there read all the chapter, but I decided not to. Starting in verse 26, it gets a little rough. It's a little rough. But Jehoshabeam, the son of a Hakmonite, he lifted his spear against 300 and killed by him at one time. Now, in 2 Samuel, it says he lifted his spear against 800 and killed them at one time. And there's several possibilities here. One, it's possible there's a mistake in the text, one or the other. Okay, it could be a mistake here, and it's supposed to read 800, or it could be a mistake in 2 Samuel, it's supposed to read 300 in 2 Samuel. Or it's possible he did 800 at one time and 300 at another time, okay, which would make him pretty much the baddest guy around. Let's be honest, okay? If you kill 800 you kill 300, you're like, well, that's pretty doggone impressive. Okay, you kill 800 at one point and 300 at another point, well, you don't mess with that guy. I mean, if he walks in the room, everybody just shrinks into the corner and says, we're not crossing that fella. Okay? And after him was Eleazar, the son of Dodo, the Ahoite, who was one of the three mighty men. Now, it leaves out Shammah. Shammah is one of the guys in 2 Samuel 23, and we don't know exactly why it left it out. Many people think it was just a mistake. The Chronicles have some weird sort of textual issues, and this is one of those. So you see there's 3 mighty men, but there's only 2 mentioned, Jehoshabim and Eleazar. Where's the third? Well, the third was Shammah, Shammah, and he's mentioned in 2 Samuel, okay, 23. So those are the 3 mighty men, and they were with David at Pasdamim. Now there the Philistines were gathered for battle, and there was a piece of ground full of barley. So the people fled. Everybody runs. But these 3 men plant themselves in the middle of the barley field, and they fight off the Philistines and defend their people against the Philistines, and the Lord brings about a great victory. Okay? Verse 15. Now 3 of the 30 chief men went down to the rock to David into the cave of Adullam. Now, the word 30, just again a couple of notes here on the text, could mean literally 30 men, or it could be like platoon or squad. It could be like a designation of a group of men that could range in size, okay? Maybe 30 is the highest, and maybe it could be as low as 15. So it's probably a military term, kind of like legion. Legion could be a whole lot of men, but it didn't have to be. It was kind of like a term for a group of soldiers, and 30 probably is that term as well. The cave of Adullam. Let me read to you from Samuel chapter 22. Who came? 1 Samuel chapter 22. Who came to David at the cave of Adullam? Okay, that's what it says. This is when David's running around the wilderness being chased by Saul. David therefore departed from there and escaped to the cave of Adullam. So when his brothers and all his father's house heard it, they went down to him. And everyone who was in distress, and everyone who was in debt, and everyone who was discontented gathered to David. Gathered to David. Okay? Everyone who was in distress, everyone who was in debt, everyone who was discontented gathered to David, and he became captain over them. In other words, David was pulling off the losers. He was pulling off the scum. I mean, he's got all these guys coming in, and you can see him sitting there at the front of his cave. Oh, man, that guy? Oh, man, that guy? Seriously? This is the best you guys can get? But these become David's mighty men. These become David's mighty men. They become the great warriors that David uses to conquer the Philistines and conquer the kingdom, conquer the other kingdoms. They were not a great-looking group at the beginning, but David formed them into a fighting group, and they became warriors, and they were loyal to David. By the way, these are basically the special forces of David's army. That's who these guys are. They're the Navy SEALs. They're the Green Berets. They're the guys with all the special training. They're the guys that if you really needed a job done, they're the ones you called in. Okay? That's who the mighty men are. Now verses 15 through 19. Now 3 of the 30 chief men went down. I read that right. Verse 16. David was then in the stronghold, and the garrison of the Philistines was then in Bethlehem. So the Philistines had conquered Bethlehem. Okay? This is David's hometown. Remember this. This is David's hometown. This is where he grew up. This is where he lived. And they conquered Bethlehem. And David said with longing, "Oh, that someone would give me a drink of water from the well of Bethlehem, which is by the gate." Now here's David. He grew up in Bethlehem. No doubt he took his sheep out to the pasture. And when he came home, there was that well by the gate. And he would stop there as he got ready to go home and get some water. It's probably the best water. Reminded him of home. And the Philistines all around him. He's just talking. David's like, "Oh, man, wouldn't I love some water from that well? Here I am stuck up here in the mountains. Wouldn't I love some water from the well?" And the guy's like, "Oh, great, let's go get it." Okay, so they broke through the camp of the Philistines, drew water from the well of Bethlehem that was by the gate, and took it and brought it to David. Now, let's think about this for a minute. Okay, it's one thing to go in and kill somebody, assassinate somebody, do something like that. But they broke through the line and brought water back. Okay? Not an easy task at all. Okay, not an easy task when you're trying to fight off the Philistines. The kids and I had some fun with this last night. Imagine them, two guys standing guard at the well, and one guy pulling up the bucket, trying to get it all out of there. Okay. So they get the water and they bring it back to David. Nevertheless, David would not drink it, but he poured it out to the Lord. It was an offering to the Lord. And we'll talk about this a little bit later. And he said, "Far be it from me, O my God, that I should do this. Shall I drink the blood of these men who put their lives in jeopardy? For at the risk of their lives they brought it. Therefore he would not drink it. These things were done by the 3 mighty men." Then you got Abishai, who lifted up a spear against 300 and killed them and won a name. And of the 3, he was more honored than the other 2, and he became their captain, but he did not attain to the first 3. So it's 3 and then 3 again. There's a top 3 and then a secondary 3. And it's a little tricky to figure out who belongs to what group. Probably kind of a flexible group. And then you have Benaiah, the son of Jehoiada. Benaiah was essentially, as you read through the text, became an assassin. Okay? Benaiah was sent out to kill people. Okay? If somebody messed up, you called in Benny. You called him Benaniah, and you brought him in, and you said, okay, Benaniah, this guy's out of line. Can you please go take care of this guy? And Benaniah would go and take care of this guy. And you can see why he was an assassin. Okay? Not a guy to be messed with. He killed two, and I think the text that was read said hero-like men, or heroes of Moab. But the phrase is two lion-like men of Moab. So two men who were like a lion. And then he actually killed a literal lion in a pit on a snowy day. Not easy to do. I mean, it's not easy to do. Let's just be honest. It's snowing, you're in a pit, you're down there with a lion. I mean, not many of us will volunteer. Sure, I'll go do that. I'm up for that. Okay. And you can't use your rifle, or anything like that. You got to fight them with your hands and your sword. And he killed an Egyptian, a man of great height, 5 cubits tall. In the Egyptian's hand there was a spear like a weaver's beam. What does that remind you of? This reminds you of somebody. It reminds you of a guy from Gath who David fought, Goliath, whose spear was like a weaver's beam. In other words, it was big. It was big spear, okay? And Benaniah went down with a staff, wrested the spear out of the Egyptian's hand, and killed him with his own spear. Now, this is a great story. I mean, I don't know why we don't talk about this more. It's fantastic. He goes down there. Here's this huge Egyptian with this big spear, and he goes down. And not only does he kill him, he kills him with his own weapon. He takes his spear from him and runs him through it. Again, the boys love this. Last night we were talking about, well, I can imagine the Egyptian running away and Benaniah just taking that spear and whoosh, whoosh, And of course, they add all sorts of sound effects. Boys do that. Boys do sound effects. Okay? All right, and then it goes on down, and we get lots more. A long list here of mighty men down, starting verse 26 and rolling down through the list. Now, it's interesting. In 2 Samuel chapter 23, it ends with Uriah, which Uriah is in verse 41. It ends with Uriah, but in Chronicles here obviously keeps going to add some more men to the list, okay? More men to the list. So, what can we get from this? I mean, besides just these are some cool stories about some cool men who did some great deeds. I mean, what's the point of this passage for us today? Okay, I'll make one note here. I just want to make one note about the violence in the Old Testament. We should not be embarrassed or shrink back from the violence in the Old Testament. Okay? If God told David to kill certain people, then David was righteous in killing those people. Abraham killed people. Moses killed people. Joshua killed people. David killed people. Solomon killed people. Okay? And we kind of shrink back from this a little bit. We're a little embarrassed sometimes by the God of the Old Testament. Like, man, I really wish he hadn't had him kill all those Canaanites. It would have really made my apologetics that much easier if I didn't have to offend God against this. I really wish he hadn't had a Samuel hack Agag to pieces at his feet. I really wish that hadn't happened, Well, it did. And it was righteous. And that's my point. It was holy, and it was righteous, and it was good. What Joshua did to the Canaanites was righteous and good. What David did to these men was righteous and good. What Benaniah did to the Egyptian was righteous and good. Okay? And I could go into a long rant about this, but I think a lot of us have a misunderstanding that life is inherently sacred. Okay? That there is no way we should ever take a life under any circumstances. Well, if that's the case, you're going to have a big problem with the whole Old Testament. Because there's people dying everywhere, left and right. People being killed by swords and spears. People being hacked into pieces. People being killed by God himself. Okay? So no, life is not inherently sacred. You can lose the right to life. And God can take that from you. And it is the job of the magistrates and the job of our protectors to defend us against those type of attacks. And obviously the United States is not Israel. And President Obama is not David, or the governor is not David. But there is a truth in the Old Testament that nations have a right to defend their borders. And they have a right to protect themselves by violent force. Now there's a lot of discussion there. I understand that. What's a just war? What's righteous? And obviously our government has kind of jumped ship with this. But as you read through Chronicles, there's going to be a lot of bodies in the wake of Chronicles we go through. A lot of dead people. And that should not embarrass you. This is God's word. And it's true, not just the New Testament, not just the parts we like, but the whole thing is true from beginning to end. And the whole thing shows God's righteous deeds from beginning to end. Okay, so what can we learn about, what can we take away from this passage? Okay, first of all, we're in a battle. Okay, this is the first point I want to make. John Calvin said, while we are on earth, we must prepare to do battle. We are in the middle of a war. And that has been the case from Genesis 3 till today. We are in the middle of a war. We're not here on a luxury cruise. And sometimes I think Christians get a little confused about this. Okay? What do you think? We're here on a luxury cruise. We're like, well, I'm looking for my waitress. Where is she at? I'm looking for my free drinks. I'm looking for dancing and partying and all this sort of fun stuff. Okay? We're not here on a luxury cruise. This isn't ease. This isn't luxury. We are in the middle of a battle, just like David and his mighty men were. Now, it's not a physical battle. We understand that. Okay, we're not going over WVU with all our rifles, all of Evan's rifles. He's got a whole stockpile back there. All of Evan's rifles and demanding justice and demanding that things happen. No, we fight a spiritual battle, but it is still a war. It is still a battle. We are in the middle of a battle. And if you're anything like me, a lot of times you're like, Lord, I just don't want to fight anymore. I'm just kind of done with the battle. I want to quit. I do want that luxury cruise. Caribbean vacation. Bahamas, beach. That's what we want. Okay? That's what we desire. We'll have time for that when you're dead. Okay? Until that point, you need to be fighting. We're in the middle of a war. Okay? Let me say one other thing about that. It is a battle, though, that we fight with joy. Okay? And sometimes we get confused on this. We're like, I'm going to be mean and sour and grumpy, and I'm going to equate that with fighting the battle. No. We don't whine, we don't pout, we don't grumble, we don't complain, we don't walk around with frowns. That's not fighting for the Lord. We fight with joy. We fight with gladness of heart. Jesus told us to rejoice when men hate us. Rejoice. 1 Corinthians, Acts chapter 4, they rejoiced that they were counted worthy of being persecuted. We're to rejoice that we're in the middle of the battle. We're to rejoice when we get wounded. We're to rejoice that the Lord felt fit to push us to the front line. We're to rejoice in that. We're not supposed to be sour about it. I think a lot of Reformed people equate being sour with fighting the battle. Well, you're fighting the wrong battle. Maybe you should fight a battle with your own grumpiness first before you go out and fight against everybody else. So in the middle of a cheerful battle, a battle that's already been won, a battle that Jesus has crushed the head of the serpent, and we're doing mop-up duty. Okay? So in the middle of a battle. Now, when there's a battle, what is the first thing you have to do? Well, my son said you have to get weapons. Well, no, actually, the first thing you have to do is you have to choose sides. That's the first thing you have to do. Whose side are you on? Okay? And listen to this phrase from Joshua 24. Joshua 24, verses 14 and 15. We know the last part of this, but a lot of the verse we don't remember. Now, therefore, Joshua's given his last charge to Israel before he dies. Now, therefore, fear the Lord. Serve in sincerity and in truth, and put away the gods which your fathers served on the other side of the river and in Egypt. Serve the Lord. And if it seems evil to you to serve the Lord, choose for yourselves this day whom you will serve, whether the gods which your fathers served on the other side of the river, or the gods of the Amorites. In other words, the gods in Egypt, or the gods over here in Canaan. You decide which gods you're going to serve and whose land you dwell. But as for me and my house, we will serve the Lord. Okay? And this is the choice we all have to make. What side are we going to take up on? Okay? Whose side are we going to be on? Okay? Who are we going to be loyal to? Who are we going to serve? These men knew that David was God's man, and they united themselves to David. They were loyal to David. Okay? So first, when there's a battle, you have to pick a side. And I think we're all on the same side here, Lord willing. We're all on the same side. And what does that mean? What does that mean for us? Well, it means loyalty. Loyalty to the kingdom, loyalty to Christ. Now, I looked up some different synonyms here. Fealty, that's a great old word. It's an old English word, fealty. It comes from fide, which means faith. It means I swear my faithfulness to you. Fealty, fidelity, loyalty, love. Okay? We are to be loyal to Christ and loyal to his kingdom. Our generation, our culture has a very hard time with loyalty. Okay? There's not very much that we actually love. There's not very much that we're actually willing to fight for. Okay? We used to fight for our country. We used to fight for our communities. We used to fight for our families. We used to fight for our spouses, our wives. We used to fight for our children. We don't fight for much of anything anymore. We're pretty much apathetic. Yeah. Christ does not call us to be apathetic. He calls us, like these men, to fight for him and to fight with him. He calls us to be loyal to him and to be loyal to Jesus and loyal to his kingdom. We're not very good at this as a culture. Think about all the cynicism. Think about all the mocking. Think about all the sarcasm. Think about how we basically as a culture make fun of anything and everything. Okay? If you pull a man off the street and ask him, what are you willing to die for? If I put a gun to your head right now and I said, what are you willing to die for? What do you think that man would say? Well, I'm guessing the list is really, really short, if there's anything at all. There's not much we're willing to die for, is there? There's not much we're willing to stand in the middle of the barley field and fight for. There's not much we're willing to go down and fight a lion on a snowy day for. And this is a problem. This is a problem because Christ demands loyalty. And loyalty is not just, I'm not against you. This is often how we interpret loyalty. Okay, well, I'm not fighting against you, so I must be loyal to you. That doesn't work. That's not what loyalty is. Loyalty is fighting for someone. These men weren't like, well, you know what, David, you go get them. We won't oppose you. We won't get in your way. You go get them, David. No. They took up the sword and they said, I'm going to go fight with David. Loyalty means you fight for someone. You fight with someone. Loyalty does not mean you just make sure you don't get in the way. That's cowardice. That's not loyalty. Okay? And for us as Christians, it is hard for us to grasp this because there's so many things our forefathers, you think about our fathers, and I know a lot of people would look back, and whether you're talking about Christian fathers or we're talking about magistrates, would look back and they would say, I don't think they should have done this, I don't think they should have done this, I don't think they should have done this. They were too hard, they were too rough. They shouldn't have fought that battle. They shouldn't have fought that war. They shouldn't have raised that controversy. They shouldn't have created that problem. Okay? You see this with the Reformation today where people are trying to undo the Reformation. They were too hard, they were too rough. You see that in World War II and the Revolution. Things like that. Too hard, too rough. And when I hear that, what I hear is there's nothing worth fighting for anymore. That's what I hear when I hear that as a culture. And as Christians. What truth are you willing to die for? Ask yourself that question. What truth are you willing to pay the price for? What truth are you willing to fight for? And I think as Christians, for most of us, there's not very many, if any at all. Maybe Jesus is Lord and died on the cross, and that's about it. Okay? And I think that's a problem for us. Maybe our fathers in the faith, and maybe our fathers in America made some choices they shouldn't have made. But at least they loved something enough to fight for it. And I wonder if we went back and we were pushed into the time of David, if we would be like these mighty men. I wonder if we would have that type of loyalty to David. Or if we'd be more like, well, who's David? Who's he? Who is he? He's really not worth fighting for. He's not worth dying for. Okay. Let me add that when our loyalty is to Jesus Christ, that does not eliminate other loyalties. It, in fact, gives us the proper way to be loyal to them. Helps us be loyal to them. So when we're loyal to Jesus, it doesn't mean we're less loyal to our country, less loyal to our community, less loyal to our city, less loyal to our spouse. It means we're more loyal. It means we fight for them. We love them. Okay? It doesn't mean we think they're perfect, but it means we care because we love Jesus. In other words, Jesus allows us, loyalty to Jesus allows us to be loyal to those around us and not just mock them and sit in the armchair and tell them they're wrong. Okay? Tell them they're wrong. So I ask you this morning, where are your loyalties? Who are you fighting for? Who are you defending? What enemies are you driving away? Wives, are you loyal to your husbands? Oh, well, I don't undermine them, Pastor Pete. I don't undermine them. I don't say bad things about them online. I don't expose all his weaknesses. Well, that's not enough. Are you fighting for him? That's what loyalty is. And husbands, you can ask yourself the same question. Are you fighting for your wives, or are you just making sure they're happy? Or are you fighting for them? And that's the idea. So we have a battle. We're in the middle of it. We must choose a side, and that means we have to have loyalty. And that loyalty is to Jesus Christ and to his kingdom and to his people. And there's a difference between loyalty and apathy. There's a difference between that. And I think we confuse the two. I'm apathetic, and therefore I must be loyal. No. And I would just encourage you, don't become cynical, sarcastic, about everything. And this is so our culture. C.S. Lewis has a great quote in Screw Tape Letters. You know Screw Tape Letters. Screw Tape, the senior demon, is talking to his apprentice. And he's kind of walking his apprentice through some things. And he's got this whole chapter on humor. And Screw Tape is afraid of most kinds of humor. He's kind of afraid of that. He says joy, laughter, humor, that can really be dangerous for us demons. We don't want that. But there's kind of humor that's really good. And the phrase C.S. Lewis uses is flippancy. There's a flippancy about things that we can really use. You got somebody who's flippant, who doesn't really care, who mocks everything, who makes fun of everything, who laughs at everything. Guess what? They have no joy. They have no affection. They don't love anything enough to die for it. Nothing. Okay? So the first thing is we have to have loyalty. Loyalty to Jesus Christ, loyalty to his kingdom, and loyalty to those around us. And loyalty means fighting. And that brings me to the next thing. And that is courage. Courage. So we're in the middle of this battle. And if you think about these men, it's hard to put yourself in their shoes. But if you think about it, what you see these men doing is practicing courage. They may be afraid, but they're not afraid to go do the task that needs to be done. Okay? Courage can only be seen when there is risk. Courage can only be seen when there is actual risk, actual failure. Okay? So every hard thing you do is not an act of courage. We get confused about this. Okay? There's a lot of hard things you do that there's really no risk to. If you fail, it's either not a big deal, or the chances you fail are almost non-existent. Okay? Courage requires danger. It means you go and do something that you don't know you're going to win at. You don't know if you're going to succeed. You don't know if it's all going to work out in the end. Okay? And we like to be comfortable. We like to look like we're courageous when really all we're doing is living within our little comfort zone, trying to make sure that everything's easy for us. People might say, wow, he's doing some great deeds, but you know you're really not. You know you're really doing exactly what makes you comfortable, exactly what makes it easy for you. Risk requires danger. These men loved David enough to put their own lives at danger, at risk for him. Okay? And that's exactly what it needs to be for Jesus. Do you risk for Jesus Christ? Do you have courage for Jesus Christ? Okay? A couple of thoughts about courage. There is no courage for the man sitting at home while the battle rages. We love to play armchair quarterback. You know, armchair quarterback's the guy who's sitting there with his beer and his remote control, and the quarterback's out there fighting, and there's a 320-pound defensive lineman about to crush his skull, and the guy's like, what did he throw the pass so quick for? The guy in the armchair. Well, what's the big deal? You know? Well, it's easy to say that when the 320-pound lineman is not in your living room ready to kill you. It's easy to say. So it's easy to critique those who are in the middle of the battle when you're not in the middle of it. Second thing about courage, don't confuse risk with stupidity. And these are sometimes confused with one another. Don't confuse risk with stupidity. There are things you should do because they're right and good and you don't know how they're going to turn out. And there are things you should not do because they're just foolish. And I think especially young men, teenagers in particular, are prone to see, I'm driving 90 miles an hour down the interstate racing through cars as an act of courage. No, that would be an act of stupidity. Okay? Not an act of courage. Third, the courage must be in the proper direction. Muslims have a lot of courage. And I thought it was funny after 9/11, they all accused them of cowardice. You're going, I'm not exactly sure killing yourself for your religion would be an act of cowardice. Now, if you want to say it's a misdirected courage, you could say that. But your courage has to be in the right direction. And that means it has to be according to the word of the Lord. Notice what it says in verse 10 again. These men gathered to David. They strengthened themselves in his kingdom with all Israel to make him king according to the word of the Lord concerning Israel. So these men weren't with David just because they liked David and thought he was a cool guy. Nice haircut, good tattoos. Like, wow, David's pretty cool. I'll follow him. It wasn't because David bribed them with sex and money and power. David's like, hey, listen, I have all these concubines. You guys come join me. You can have some concubines. David didn't do that. They joined David. Why? Because David was a man of God, and David was following God. In other words, their courage was in the right direction. It has to be directed toward Jesus Christ and his kingdom. So you can do a lot of things that are courageous, and men and women can do a lot of things that are courageous, but they're courageous for them. there's selfish motivation. I want to be courageous so people will see me. I want to be courageous so I'll be patted on the back. The courage has to come because you love Jesus, and it has to be according to the word of the Lord. Okay? And one more thing. One man's courage is not another man's. Okay? And this is important. What might be easy for one person might be very difficult and a courageous act for another person. What might be courageous for one might be very easy for another. So don't assume that our courage looks the same across the board. Okay? So, battle. We pick a side. We become loyal to Jesus Christ like these men were loyal to David. And then we act with courage in the right direction. We act with courage in the right direction. What is it that you don't want to do that Jesus has called upon you to do? What is it that you're like, no, I'm not stepping over that line. I'm not going through that door, Lord. I mean, I'm doing all this over here, Jesus. I'm doing all this. Isn't this enough? Well, you know why? This is easy for you. This is simple for you. What's the thing that Jesus asks you to do that's hard for his kingdom? That's difficult? That will be a risk for you. A real risk. A risk of failure. What's he asking you to do there? And you could be, the risks we run into are very rarely our own lives, okay, like these men. We don't run into risk about our own lives. But you could risk your reputation. You could risk some money. You could risk a friendship. You could risk a relationship within your family. When's the last time you actually risked something for Jesus Christ? Courage, cheerful courage in the right direction. Facing the danger, knowing you could fail, knowing it could blow up in your face, and doing it anyway. Going down the pit on a snowy day, knowing you could die, not worried about it. Okay. But then this risk and this courage and this loyalty to Jesus Christ brings about a reward. And we see this throughout the passage. These men's names were engraven in this book. And here we are 3,000 years later. And we're still reading about these guys. Do you think our names will be in a book 3,000 years from now? I don't think it's very likely. Maybe. I don't know. Maybe you do some great deed. This is funny, isn't it? All the serial killers, they will last forever, won't they? In 3,000 years, they'll be writing books about serial killers, and all those good people who did those great deeds, they won't be. Okay. But these men are rewarded for their efforts. They're rewarded by King David with positions and power and authority and a good name. And they're rewarded by God with a name written in his scriptures for eternity. We like to think when we go into the battle that the main thing is we're doing it for Jesus. And I don't care if there's a reward. I don't care if there's any reward at all. Reward doesn't matter to me. Well, that would be fine if that was what Jesus taught. But that's not what Jesus taught. Jesus said, hey, guess what? There is a reward there. Remember that passage, the rich young ruler? Rich young ruler comes, he says, what must I do to inherit eternal life? And Jesus says, give everything away. And the rich young ruler's like, I can't do that, and he leaves. Okay? And then Jesus says, it's harder for a rich man to enter the kingdom of heaven than a camel to go through the eye of a needle. And Peter comes and says, hey, Lord, I've given up everything for you. What's in it for me? And Jesus doesn't say, well, Peter, you're so selfish. You're so selfish, Peter. What's wrong with you? Just do it because it's right, Peter. Just do it because it's right. Don't worry about the reward. No, that's not what Jesus says. Jesus says, guess what? Whoever gives up this in this life will get 10 times as much or 100 times as much in the next life. So if you're loyal to Jesus and you have courage, you take risks for him, he promises you reward. He says the reward will be great. Matthew chapter 5. To give you one example. And this isn't just kind of one verse. It's not like Jesus says this one time or Paul says it one time. It's over and over and over again throughout the New Testament. Okay. Listen to what Jesus says. Blessed are you when they revile you and persecute you and say all kinds of evil against you falsely for my sake. Rejoice and be exceedingly glad, for great is your reward in heaven. For so they persecute the prophets who were before you. Great is your reward. Okay. In other words, following after Jesus, you are guaranteed reward. You are guaranteed things that will be good in the kingdom of heaven. Okay? So these men were rewarded with a good name. They're rewarded with stuff from King David. They're rewarded with all of this. And we will be rewarded as well. So we're walking through this battle. Choose a side. Loyalty to Jesus Christ, which brings courage. And we go fight the battles that he's called upon us to fight. We take the risk he's called upon us to take. And we get rewarded for that risk. And the final thing I want to bring your attention is that when we have won, The victory comes from God. Okay? Verse 14. But they stationed themselves in the middle of that field, defended it, and killed the Philistines. So the Lord brought about a great victory. Okay? Now wait a minute. Wasn't it Jehoshabim and Eleazar and Shammah with their swords and their sweat and their toil and their tears in the middle of that field? Wasn't it them that brought about the great victory? Wasn't it their arm that did it? Wasn't it their might and their power and their skill with the sword? Isn't that what brought about the victory? No. No. The Lord brought about the great victory. It is always God's work. When we get to the end and we see victory, when you get to the end of a day and you see a victory in that day, or when you get to the end of a decade and see victory within that decade, the victory always comes from God. It doesn't matter how hard you worked. It doesn't matter how hard you labored. It doesn't matter how skilled you were, how well you handled the situation. It is never from you, the victory. The victory is always from God. It is always His grace that does that work. And that means there is no room for pride. There is no room for pride for us. We want to win. We want to see people converted to Christ. We want to see communities won for Jesus. We want to see battles won in our own lives over sin. We want to see principalities and powers put to flight. We want to see those things. But if we come to the end of that, and we're like, by my might and by my hand I have done this, God will curse our labors. He will not share His glory with another. God will not do that. Okay? And therefore we need to remember, whatever victory, big or small, that we have had, it is always the work of God and not the work of our own labor. Okay? And no doubt these men were skilled. No doubt these men were courageous. No doubt they knew how to fight the battle. But that didn't matter. Skill, courage, resources, it didn't matter. What mattered is that the Lord brought about the victory. Okay, so I'm going to walk you through that again. We're in the middle of a battle. It means we have to choose sides. We have to be loyal to Jesus Christ. We have to fight for Him and fight for His kingdom with courage. We have to take the risks that He calls upon us to take and not be ashamed of that. Take risk according to His word. That risk brings reward. And when we see victory, it comes from God and not from our own skill and our own hand. That's why I'll close with this. Jesus is worth this. The kingdom is worth this. Whatever blood you might spill, whatever sweat and toil you might pour out, whatever you might sacrifice and give up, the kingdom of Christ is worth it. Our Lord and Savior is worth it. If these men thought this hard, put their lives on line for this man David, who was a human, a fallible human being, how much more should we fight for our Lord and Savior Jesus Christ and for those who belong to Him? He will not let us down. He is worth being loyal to. He is worth fighting for. Let's pray together. Almighty God in heaven, we praise You for Your Son, Jesus Christ. We praise You for the work He has done. We praise You that He has called us into His kingdom. We ask, Lord, Your forgiveness for our lack of loyalty, for our apathy, for our failure to love with a deep, abiding love those things that really matter. Help us, Lord, to stir up our affections so we're not just sitting here floating through life. We're not just hoping everything turns out. We're not just doing what's easy for us. But instead, we are fighting the battles You've called upon us to fight. And if we pay, and if we suffer, and if we bleed for it, so be it, Lord. Help us to fight those battles with courage and with grace. We pray this in Jesus' name. Amen.
Amen.